Housing Choice Voucher Briefing Presentation. Bloomington Housing Authority administers the Housing Choice Voucher or the Section 8 program throughout Bloomington and Monroe County, Indiana. BHA does this through funding through the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD. Welcome to the video presentation. In its simplest form, Bloomington Housing Authority pays for all or a portion of an eligible family's rent in a suitable housing unit. The key to receiving this rental assistance are understanding how the HCV program works, what your responsibilities are, and how to find suitable housing that you can afford in a good location. The presentation will outline general program requirements within several topic segments. You can ask specific questions at the end of this video when you have an opportunity to speak with your Housing Choice Voucher Specialist. When you have an opportunity to speak with your Housing Choice Voucher Specialist, at that time you will discuss your income, household composition, and sign your required paperwork in order to receive your Housing Choice Voucher. Once you are participating in this briefing, your information you already provided shows you meet HUD's definition of a family, and your total household income and assets falls within the acceptable limits for the number of people that will be living with you. Throughout this presentation and speaking with your HCV specialist, you will learn all the keys necessary to participate in the Housing Choice Voucher program. There is a lot of information to learn, so pay close attention and be sure to write down any questions to ask your Housing Choice Voucher specialist at the end of this presentation. The key to finding a good home starts at the beginning, and that beginning starts with understanding program requirements. Your briefing packet. You've already been provided with a briefing packet that contains many of the documents that will be discussed here today. In order to continue to receive assistance, you are required to sign and return documents back to your Housing Choice Voucher Specialist. Once those documents are signed and provided to the Housing Choice Voucher Specialist, they will be provided a signed copy of your Housing Choice Voucher back to you. At that point, you will then be able to search for suitable housing. When you sign your name, you are stating that you understand the program and you agree to follow all of the BHA policies and procedures that are required to participate in the Housing Choice Voucher program. We will ask you to sign a briefing checklist that indicates that you have received or have been explained all the items that are in the briefing packet. These items include the Housing Choice Voucher itself, the request for tenancy approval, the tenancy addendum, the booklet, A Good Place to Live, the pamphlet on protecting your family from lead-based paint in your home, the EIV brochure, Fair Housing Complaint Form, your right to appeal, an overview of the family rights and obligations, information on fraud, waste, and abuse, the Violence Against Women's Act forms, information on portability, and housing search resources. Understanding your voucher. The Housing Choice Voucher is typically good for 90 days from the date it is issued. You must submit a Request for Tenancy Approval form, or the RTA, with a copy of the proposed lease within the time of the voucher. Only one RTA form may be submitted at a time. Once the RTA form is submitted, the time on your voucher is suspended until the Housing Choice Voucher Specialist and Housing Choice Voucher Inspector is able to determine if the unit meets the criteria necessary to be eligible for subsidy. BHA has a minimum rent requirement, meaning that a family must pay, at a minimum, $50 towards their portion of the rent. If this provision impacts you directly, at the end of this presentation, please speak with your Housing Choice Voucher Specialist. The Housing Choice Voucher is your key to assistance. You will be asked to sign your Housing Choice Voucher. Once you have signed your voucher and returned it to the Housing Choice Voucher Specialist, you will be provided with a signed copy. It is critical that you read all of the HCV documents that have been provided to you today. It is critical that you read your voucher carefully as it outlines important roles and responsibilities of a participant in the Housing Choice Voucher program. A landlord may request to see a signed copy of your Housing Choice Voucher to confirm that you are a participant eligible for the subsidy in the program. The HCV program is a privilege that comes with great responsibility. You may be denied or terminated if certain policies or procedures are not followed. This information on policies and procedures and grounds for denial or termination will be discussed in further detail later in this presentation. Whether you have found a new unit to rent or you wish to use your voucher in your current unit that you are residing in, the request for tenancy approval form must be submitted to Bloomington Housing Authority. You will give this form to the landlord that you choose to rent from and who has approved you for tenancy. The landlord should complete the RTA packet and then submit it back to BHA. This form details the amount of the unit's rent, the type of the unit that will be rented, the utilities provided in the unit, and who is responsible for those utilities, as well as any other specific information that identifies this unit and allows BHA to determine rent reasonableness or comparability to other similar units in the area. This document must also be accompanied by the property amenities form, the lead-based paint disclosure form, and a proposed lease for the unit which the participant wishes to reside. Only one RTA may be submitted at a time. Once an RTA is submitted, BHA will stop the clock on any of the days left on the voucher in order to ensure that no time is wasted while BHA staff determine if the unit meets the criteria to be leased. If BHA determines that the unit meets all required criteria for it to be entered into a subsidy, the tenant and landlord shall enter into a lease. This is a legally binding contract between the tenant and the landlord. BHA is not a party to the lease. BHA strongly recommends that you do not enter into a lease agreement with a landlord until your unit has been inspected and approved by the housing authority. Once the unit passes inspection, BHA enters into a housing assistance payment contract with the landlord in which BHA agrees to subsidize the unit for a portion or all of the rent required. BHA does require the lease to include an additional document, the tenancy addendum, which is an extra protection for both the tenants and the landlords and complements the Housing Choice Voucher participant's lease. As seen here, the tenancy addendum is an additional document which outlines specifics about the program and outlines who is responsible for fees, charges, contract rent, and rent to the owner. This document includes critical information for both the landlord and the tenant and outlines all the steps and requirements for the tenant to continue to receive funding through the Housing Choice Voucher program. Additional items included in your Housing Choice Voucher briefing packet include HUD forms such as a good place to live, information on hazards of lead-based paint, information on fraud, waste, and abuse, documentation on housing discrimination, a list of landlords who may accept the Housing Choice Voucher, an overview of how your tenant rent will be calculated, how to file a complaint, request an informal review, an assistance meeting regarding termination of assistance, as well as how to request an informal hearing. Tools on areas of opportunity and finding housing in areas that best meet your needs, information on how utility allowances are applied for your units, documentation on the Violence Against Women's Act protections, and how portability works. Within your briefing packet, HUD provides a document called A Good Place to Live. This document outlines the general requirements that HUD looks for when approving a quality home. This booklet should be used as a tool to identify what the inspector will look for as they go through a unit step by step, room by room. This is a good tool to provide a potential landlord as it outlines the requirements for housing quality standards. A brochure is included with your HCV briefing packet that discusses how to protect your family from lead in your home. This packet includes information on ways to eradicate lead, simple steps that can be taken to ensure that you protect your family, especially for those households with children under the age of 6, and ways to identify potential hazards in a home that was built before 1978. This packet provides contact numbers in case there is a potential for lead-based paint exposure within your current unit or a potential unit. An additional tool to assist you with securing a unit is the HCV Lease-Up Checklist document. This document provides helpful tips and steps to follow to give yourself the best opportunity possible to utilize your voucher. Housing discrimination, unfortunately, is still common practice in a lot of areas. For this reason, HUD provides an "Are You a Victim of Housing Discrimination? Fair Housing is Your Right" booklet, which is included with your HCV briefing packet. Within this packet, there is information on how to file a complaint if you feel you are a victim of housing discrimination. Housing discrimination is illegal, and if you feel that you have been discriminated against based on race, color, national origin, religion, sex, family status, or due to a disability, HUD wants to ensure that you have all the tools necessary to make them aware of this discrimination. As noted prior, participation in the HCV program is a privilege that comes with great responsibilities. This part of the briefing presentation, we will go over the family rights and obligations to ensure that all participants and applicants are fully aware of the requirements to participate and continue to receive assistance, as well as what would deem a denial of assistance or termination. All applicants' family members and members of their household, as well as in some cases, guests, are required to participate in the family rights and obligations to ensure the right to peaceful enjoyment for others that live in a similar area. A violation of the family rights and obligations may result in denial or termination from participation in the HCV program. Certain violations may result in fines and lifelong bans from participation in other government programs. Family rights and obligations are included as one of the documents that you will be provided and required to sign within this briefing packet. At this time, we will go over all of the family rights and obligations to ensure full understanding. Family obligation number 1. As a participant, you're required to provide true, complete, and accurate information within 14 calendar days from the date of request or the date of change to Bloomington Housing Authority. Failure to do so may result in termination from the program. Examples of providing true and accurate information include providing Social Security cards, the birth certificates for household members, providing proof of income changes within 14 days of the known change, providing evidence of receiving a benefit such as temporary assistance to needy families or any type of Social Security award. As a participant or an applicant, you must establish citizenship or legal immigration status for all household members. Failure to do so may result in termination or denial from participation in the program. You are responsible to take care of the assisted unit, including any maintenance of any family responsible utilities, meaning that if you are required to have a utility in your name, if that utility is disconnected, you may be required to have that utility turned back on within 24 hours, or risk losing your housing choice voucher. You are required to report any housing quality standard violations to your landlord and the BHA. You must cooperate in all scheduled meetings with your HCV specialist. Requirements to complete and sign all forms, including but not limited to the tenant information form, any authorization forms that require signatures, and all forms related to initial and continued eligibility on the program are mandated. Failure to do so may result in initial denial or termination from the HCV program. You're required to supply any information that BHA deems to be necessary for all household members, including the submission of birth certificates or verification of birth, Social Security cards, or verification of Social Security numbers, and photo IDs for all adult household members. You are required to remain in the initial assisted unit for 12 months of assistance under the HCV program. Thereafter, remain in the unit for the period of time specified in your initial lease agreement. You are required to use the assisted unit only for the purpose of residence. You may not use the unit for a business. You may not sublease the unit or rent it out to others. You must comply with the terms of the lease agreement as they are outlined with your landlord. Failure to comply with the lease agreement could be subject to termination from the HCV program. You are required to report all changes in writing to your HCV specialist, including changes in household income, assets, household makeup, or composition, or other changes to your living conditions within 14 calendar days of the occurrence. You are required to cooperate in establishing agreements to repay assistance that was incorrectly paid out on your behalf under any federal housing program. Also, repay assistance as agreed upon with BHA, meaning that if an eligible family fails to make the housing authority aware of an increase in income, and the housing authority then finds out of the increase, you may be required to pay back any subsidy that was paid for your behalf erroneously. Failure to pay that portion back once the housing authority notifies you could result in termination from the program. As a participant, you agree to not engage in criminal activities or allow or permit guests or any other person to engage in criminal activity. You agree to obtain written permission from your landlord and BHA prior to allowing someone to move into the unit. You agree to allow BHA to inspect your unit at a reasonable time after you have received reasonable notice, and notify BHA in writing any time the head of household is going to be absent from the unit for 30 or more consecutive calendar days. You must notify BHA and the landlord in writing at least 30 calendar days prior to terminating your lease for vacating your assisted unit. You must promptly give BHA a copy of any eviction notice received from your landlord. You agree to never sublease, assign, transfer, or rent out rooms in your unit or otherwise re-rent the unit. You also agree to not vacate the unit, but use it as a backup if you are staying with other family for an extended period of time, and you agree to never for any reason withhold your tenant portion of the rent to the landlord while you are remaining in the assisted HCV unit. Failure to pay the rent on time to the landlord is grounds for termination from the Housing Choice Voucher program. BHA may deny or terminate your housing assistance if an applicant family or an assisted family member violates any of the above-mentioned family obligations. Further, if an assisted family member or an applicant family commits fraud, bribery, and or any other corrupt or criminal act in connection with a federal housing program, or the participant participates in illegal drug activity, especially the use of methamphetamines in a federally funded property, violent activity, abuse of alcohol, and or any sexual offenses, or pays any money to the landlord over and above the amount of rent approved by BHA. The participant family may be terminated from the program. If you receive HCV program assistance for the unit while receiving other ongoing rental assistance, you may be terminated. Other reasons you may also be terminated from the HCV program include if you use the unit for purposes other than a residence. If, aside from normal wear and tear on the unit, you cause damages or allow any of your guests to cause damage to the unit. If you allow anyone to move into your unit without the express written prior permission from BHA, you may also be terminated from the program. Note that BHA defines a guest as anyone not on the lease agreement. A guest may remain in your assisted unit no longer than 14 cumulative days during any 12-month period. However, it's important to note that your lease may have different criteria for allowing others to be in your unit, and therefore you must comply with your lease. If you rent a unit from a landlord who is related to you or any member of your family by blood or marriage, including a wife, husband, parent, child, grandparent, sister, or brother, unless you receive the express written approval from BHA in advance, you may be terminated from the program. At this point, please locate the Section 8 Program Participants Agreement and Obligation Sheet in your briefing packet. Please fill out and sign the form and return it back to BHA. Failure to do so may result in denial of participation from the program. As an applicant or a participant in the program, you have certain rights within the program guidelines. If BHA sends a denial letter or a notice of termination of assistance, the notice will contain a brief explanation of the reason for your denial of an application for assistance or the reason you're being terminated from the program. You have 14 calendar days from the date of that letter or notice to submit a written appeal. If you disagree, the letter or notice, your appeal request must be made in writing and addressed to the BHA. You may also submit your written appeal by emailing your Housing Choice Voucher Specialist with your appeal request. Once you have submitted your written appeal, BHA will schedule an assistance meeting between you, your HCV specialist, and the HCV program manager. At the assistance meeting, the circumstances which led to the notice of denial or termination of assistance will be discussed. Possible steps to remain in compliance with your family obligations will be discussed and considered, and within 10 calendar days, you will receive a written decision informing you whether BHA has dismissed your denial or termination of assistance or is moving forward with the termination of your assistance. If BHA makes the decision to move forward with the termination of your assistance, you may submit a written request for an informal hearing. You have 14 calendar days from the date of BHA's written decision to submit your written request for an informal hearing. You may also submit your written request for the informal hearing by emailing your HCV specialist with your request. Once you have submitted your written request for an informal hearing, BHA will schedule this meeting between you, your HCV specialist, the HCV program manager, and a neutral third-party administrative law judge. At the hearing, you will be given an opportunity to present written or oral objections to the termination of your HCV assistance. The administrative law judge or hearing officer will notify you of the final decision in writing and provide a brief explanation for the decision. It is important to note that a housing authority is not bound by the decision of a hearing officer if the decision exceeds the authority of that hearing officer, or if the decision is contrary to any of the HUD regulations or federal, state, or local laws. For certain types of decisions, BHA is not required to provide an opportunity for an informal hearing. Within your briefing packet, HUD has provided a document called Fraud, Applying for HUD Housing Assistance. If you are found guilty of committing fraud, you may be evicted from your apartment, be required to repay all overpaid rental assistance you received, be fined up to $10,000, and be imprisoned for up to 5 years. Further, you may be prohibited from receiving any future assistance, and you could also be subject to any state or local government penalties. Fraud in the program takes many forms, and the best way to avoid it is to always make sure you ask questions of any matter that you don't understand to your HCV specialist. An important document within your briefing packet includes the EIV form. This form must be signed and returned back to your HCV specialist. This document is used by all housing authorities, and it is used to confirm name, date of birth, and social security numbers. It is used to verify any reported income sources and amounts to confirm your participation in any rental assistance program and to confirm whether or not you owe any outstanding debts to another housing agency. If this form is not signed and returned, you may not be eligible to receive HCV assistance. Within your briefing packet, you have been provided with tips for energy efficiency. Please take time to review these tips. Being mindful of energy efficiency can and will save you valuable dollars. Within your briefing packet, you have been provided with the Violence Against Women's Act document. HUD mandates that all housing authorities make participants and applicants aware of the protections offered to tenants on the program. If you are a victim of domestic violence, dating violence, assault, or stalking, and you need protections to allow you to move, or to avoid an eviction due to damages to a property caused by a perpetrator, please make your HCV specialist aware so they can offer the protections to you and ensure your safety. The VAWA protections are afforded to anyone regardless of gender. Within your briefing packet, you have been provided with BHA's interaction policy. This document outlines the responsibilities and obligations of BHA staff, applicants, participants, landlords, and all other clients when interacting with one another. BHA staff will always strive to be courteous, prompt, and professional, and we ask and expect the same from all BHA clients. Kindness is key. Failure to follow these requirements may result in denial or termination of assistance. At this point, please locate the Authorization for Release of Information sheet in your briefing packet. Please fill out and sign the form and return it back to BHA. Note: all adult household members must sign this form before being returned to BHA. Failure to do so may result in denial of participation in the program. Within your briefing packet, you have been provided with information regarding fair housing and how to request a reasonable accommodation. A reasonable accommodation is a change, exception, or adjustment to a rule, policy, practice, or service that may be necessary for a person with a disability to have an equal opportunity to use and enjoy a dwelling. In order for a reasonable accommodation request to be approved, there must be a verifiable nexus or connection between the request and the individual's disability. If you feel that you have been discriminated against based on race, color, national origin, religion, sex, family status, or due to a disability, HUD has provided the Housing Discrimination Complaint Form. You may also file any fair housing discrimination complaint online at https://FHE0903/form903/form903/start.action. One of the unique keys to the Housing Choice Voucher is portability. Portability is essentially referring to the process as to where a family can move their voucher to an area outside of the housing authority's jurisdiction. In order to be eligible to port, you must have completed your first year at your current initial unit. You must also be in good standing with the program rules, and the receiving housing authority must be willing to accept your voucher or be willing to bill the housing authority in which you are coming from. There are certain criteria required within portability that are explained in the portability document included in your briefing packet. If you have any questions regarding this process, please speak with your HCV specialist for more details on how portability works. Included in your briefing packet is a mapped listing of landlords which are commonly known to accept the Housing Choice Voucher. In your briefing packet, you have also been provided with the Landlord's Guide to the Housing Choice Voucher Program. This guide is a helpful tool to provide to a landlord who is not familiar with the HCV program or is currently not participating in the program. Any landlord or property owner may become a participating landlord on HCV program. If a landlord does decide to participate in the program, they get to decide which of their units they would like to utilize for program participation. HUD requires all housing authorities to provide information on areas of opportunity or desirable neighborhood characteristics that provide HCV participants access to goods and services, good transportation, and good schools. In order to achieve this, BHA utilizes the housingopportunityatlas.org website. In this website, which is provided in the briefing video, you may search a specific area to find out socioeconomic details, school information, and neighborhood characteristics that best meet your needs. We recommend using this resource as a tool to aid you in finding units that best meet your family's needs. At the end of this video presentation, you will have an opportunity to chat with your Housing Choice Voucher Specialist to determine how your tenant rent is calculated. Briefly, the Housing Choice Voucher takes into consideration fair market rent for an area in which you're choosing to reside, the payment standard which is allowed within that area, and then any allowance for utilities to determine the tenant's portion of the rent for that area. The tenant who receives the Housing Choice Voucher can contribute to the rent owed to the landlord. As previously mentioned, BHA does enforce a $50 minimum tenant rent. The amount of the tenant rent must contribute to the greater of the following: 30% of their monthly adjusted income, 10% of their monthly gross income, or the minimum rent as previously discussed. When you talk with your HCV specialist, they will advise of your specific rent that you must pay to your landlord. You will pay your portion of rent directly to your landlord. If the rent for your unit is greater than the BHA payment standard, you are allowed to pay the difference. However, your total rent burden must not exceed 40% of your monthly adjusted income. As discussed in the prior slides, utility allowances are one of the factors used to determine the gross rent for a unit, as well as affordability for a unit. At the end of this presentation, you will have the opportunity to talk with your HCV specialist to go over the utility allowance for the area in which you're choosing to reside. Your HCV specialist will provide you with detailed information for the subsidy standard based on your family size and the unit that you are approved for. At the end of this presentation, you will have the opportunity to discuss in more detail how your tenant portion of rent is calculated. In this first example, the landlord pays all utilities. In the second example, the tenant pays for some or all of the utilities. And on our third example, where the tenant pays some or all of the utilities, we have further shown what factors contribute to the calculation of your tenant portion of rent. Please take a moment to write down any questions you may have for your HCV specialist. These calculations will be discussed in further detail with your HCV specialist. The Family Self-Sufficiency, or FSS, is a program that enables HUD-assisted families to increase their earned income and reduce their dependency on welfare assistance and rental subsidies. BHA works in collaboration with a program coordinating committee to secure commitments of public and private resources for the operation of the FSS program. Once an eligible family is selected to participate in the program, BHA and the head of each participating family execute a FSS contract of participation that specifies the rights and responsibilities of both parties. The term of the FSS contract is generally 5 years, but it may be extended for another 2 years by the BHA for good cause. One unique component of FSS program is the escrow account. When you first enroll in the FSS program, BHA looks at your current income and sets this amount as a baseline. During your FSS participation, any increases of your tenant portion of rent due to increased wages or new sources of employment will be matched by the housing authority and placed into an escrow account on your behalf. Upon successful completion of your FSS contract, you will receive the full amount of funds that are in your escrow account. The FSS contract also incorporates the family's individual training and services plan, or ITSP. The ITSP is the document that records the plan for the family. That is the series of intermediate and long-term goals and the steps the family needs to take and the services and resources they may need access to achieve those goals. If you are interested in learning more about the FSS program, please contact 812-339-3491, extension 120, or 812-339-3491, extension 128. Included in your briefing packet is the Bloomington Resources Reference Guide. This guide provides valuable information about many available resources and services within our jurisdiction. 211 is a free and confidential service that helps Hoosiers across Indiana find the local resources they need. Dial 211 to connect with a navigator. They are available for you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If you receive or anticipate receiving child support, it is recommended that you contact the Child Support Hotline at 888-393-5866. Once you have called the hotline and provided them with your phone number, they will give you a courtesy call letting you know anytime a child support payment has been made. Due to the availability of this service, BHA will not accept information that you were unaware of having received a child support payment. Untimely reporting of child support may result in you being required to pay back to the housing authority any overpayment of subsidy made on your behalf. The final document in your briefing packet is a list of commonly asked questions regarding the HCV program. Please take a moment to review these frequently asked questions, as they may answer some questions which you currently have. At the end of this presentation, please be sure to discuss any questions that you may have with your HCV specialist. At this time, you have successfully completed the Housing Choice Voucher briefing and are now ready to seek housing utilizing the subsidy. Thank you for your participation.